Lil Gator Game is a story-driven action-adventure game for PC and Nintendo Switch, released just last month on December 14th, 2022. It was developed by an indie studio known as MegaWobble and published by Platonic Friends, the publishing offshoot of the developer Platonic Games. Now, if you've been following the channel for a while now, you'll probably know this is my first foray into reviewing indie games, and honestly, I don't think I could have picked a better game to start with. As described by the Platonic official website, this really is a quote, wholesome adventure game that's a ton of fun to play, and hopefully a lot of fun to watch a review of as well. So I guess with that, let's get to it, shall we? First things first, as this is a relatively new game, I will be avoiding my usual extensive story spoilers, so you can rest easy if you were planning on playing Lil Gator Game at some point in the future. I will, however, still be describing the intro to the game because I think it's important in understanding what this game, or really any game for that matter, is all about. So, Lil Gator Game starts out with a rather charming interactive scene between two young gator children, one a boy who we control and the other our older sister. The two of these little gator kids are in the process of creating a new game of make-believe adventure based loosely on their favorite video game. The video game in question here is more likely than not this Gator universe's version of The Legend of Zelda, so the hero of this game of make-believe, aka the player character, gets dressed up in a pointy cap, equips a sword and shield, and picks a heroic name. Our older sister then creates a few drawings and a little story that essentially serve as a transition to the main game while giving us some needed backstory. It turns out that our two main characters here loved playing this game of adventure together until one day our older sister had to go away for school. Since then, we haven't been able to play together for what seems like many years, but as luck would have it, our sister has just come home for fall break, making this the perfect chance for some good old heroic adventuring. This is where we jump to the present time that the game actually takes place in, and we find ourselves talking to a rather distracted grown-up older sister. Even though she's back home for fall break, she still has a major group assignment to work on for college, which of course means no time to play with us. After a short interaction with our sister, we're introduced to our three best friends, Avery, Jill, and Martin. We're all discussing the fact that our sister didn't even notice the decorations we put up around the island so we could play our favorite game together. Each of our friends have different viewpoints on our sister troubles, but in the end our hero decides that it's a good idea to play the game for our sister and essentially show her what she's missing out on, so she'll want to join in. Each of our three friends is given a heroic item to give to us in return for the completion of a quest, and this is where the tutorial begins. And it is a perfect example of a really well done hidden tutorial. Each of the quests our friends give us teaches us a core gameplay mechanic that we'll need for the journey ahead. We learn how to use our sword from Jill, we learn to craft and glide from Avery, and we learn to use our shield from Martin. We also meet a rather peculiar looking monkey who trades us a bracelet that allows us to climb walls at the cost of stamina, a la Breath of the Wild. If you haven't noticed already, there's a lot of Breath of the Wild inspiration sprinkled throughout Lil Gator Game, and personally I think the developers did a great job adapting that gameplay to a new experience. But back to the tutorial, we return to our sister to see her reaction, and unsurprisingly, she doesn't really seem like she has time to play with us even after witnessing our grand adventure. After this letdown, the group disbands and we plop on the ground, not really sure where to go from here. Just then, we get a text from our other good friend Tom, who was supposed to meet us here on the small island, but got confused and started setting things up on the big island. He also apparently called a bunch of people together who all wanted to play the adventure game with us, and they've all started building enemies for us to defeat, coming up with quests that need completing, and setting everything up all across the big island. As you might expect, this raises our hero's spirits once again and spurs him into action. If seeing us adventuring all across the big island doesn't make our sister want to play with us, well then nothing will. And off we go to the big island where the remainder of the game takes place. Now, I know that was a bit of a long description of the intro, but I really wanted you guys to get a good understanding of the backbone of the story and the main gameplay loop here before we move on, because we're not going to be going into any further spoilers. Personally, I really enjoyed the little intro here, and I think it does a great job of setting up a super fun and unique story while also teaching us how to play the game without making us sit through a boring old disconnected tutorial. It's hard to believe this is MegaWobble's first game with how expertly executed this intro is, but I guess they just really know how games should work. I really have nothing bad to say here, which you'll probably see is going to be a bit of a pattern going forward. Now, just to speak about the story in a general sense, it is also exceptionally well done. The humorous dialogue in particular was a highlight for me and actually had me physically laughing on a number of occasions, which is a rare occurrence for me when playing games. In my experience, it's very difficult to actually get humor to work the right way in a video game setting as compared to something like a TV show or a movie. The expectations of the user and the way they interact with the game are completely different to other more traditional forms of media, and as a result, a lot of the times jokes just don't really land. At least, they don't for me. Lil Gator Game, on the other hand, overcomes this difference in medium and uses it to its advantage throughout the game. As to specifically why I think Lil Gator Game succeeds where others fail in the jokes department, well, I think it's due to a number of factors. The main thing that comes to mind is just how great of a main character the Lil Gator Boy is. He's upbeat, charismatic, and childishly fun in a way that makes him extremely likable. Every time he talks to another character, it's always a treat to read along, and I think that generally high level of player expectation and engagement in the dialogue is one of the reasons why the humor lands so well. Other than that, I think the other main reason Lil Gator Game is so funny is the decision from the outset by the developers to make a quirky, fun game. Everything you do in this game, from collecting trash for a raccoon to mending a friendship among kids playing ninja, is imaginative in a way that really hasn't been explored in a game that I've played before. It captures the essence of childhood playtime and make-believe so perfectly, and the inherent quirkiness of those things leads to so many great opportunities for humor of all different types to really shine. But it's not just in the humor department where Lil Gator Game's story excels. Like the Playtonic website said, this is also a very wholesome game. Almost every quest you undertake, while of course usually funny in many regards, is also heartwarming and sometimes even a bit of a tearjerker. This is especially true of the main quests dealing with your best friends and your sister, but even the shorter side quests can have you cracking a smile if you're not too careful. For me at least, this was once again typically due to the childish innocence of the game and its story, but that doesn't mean there weren't more grown-up scenarios and quests, because there definitely were. Like when you have to remind a mother she's been on the phone for too long with work and her daughter's waiting for her, or really any interaction you have with the ice cream man who clearly hates his job. But anyway, overall the story of Lil Gator Game was extremely entertaining. I can honestly say I loved every single quest I did, no matter how short or how long, they were all tons of fun. For a game like this that relies so heavily on the writing and the interplay between characters, it was almost perfectly executed, in my mind. Moving away from story now, let's discuss the actual gameplay of Lil Gator Game. So, first of all, the main objective of the game is to gather friends, old and new, from around the island to the playground where we are constructing a town. You do this by, of course, completing quests for said friends and then convincing them to go to, or otherwise telling them about, the playground town. Like I've already mentioned, the quests that you'll run into in Lil Gator Game range from taking on a heroic sidekick to helping some friends decide what to eat for lunch. There really is a little bit of everything here, so of course you'll probably never find yourself getting tired of doing the same thing over and over again, like can be the case with some other quest-based games and RPGs. Now, to talk about another key element to Lil Gator Game's gameplay loop, we come to the movement. And I've gotta say, I was not expecting the movement in this game to be as satisfying and smooth as it is. If you know me, you know I love in-depth and optimizable movement systems in games. Like I always say, if it's fun to just move from one objective to another in a game, you know the developers have done something right. And that is exactly what we see here in Lil Gator Game. I could honestly have fun for hours in this game, just hopping around on my shield, going super fast, trying to find the most optimal path to my objective, or trying to find new ways to optimize my climbing so I use up less stamina. Just as an example, I found that if you spam a balloon item while you're climbing and stick to the wall, you actually lose less stamina overall, and can therefore climb higher with less overall stamina. I'm assuming this wasn't intentional on the part of the developers, but not everything that's fun always is. The base movement systems in this game are really well made and fun to use, which in turn means any even small amount of player innovation feels really rewarding, which is great for a game like this where movement between quests is so important in the grand scheme of things. I just mentioned items a moment ago, so I guess now would be as good a time as any to talk about them. In total, there are 4 equipment categories: hats, swords, shields, and items. Hats are pretty self-explanatory, they're just hats that you can put on your gator. I personally wore the bucket for like 99% of the game because I just think it looks hilarious, but there are a bunch of different hats to choose from, so if you don't like the bucket for whatever reason, you'll probably have something else to wear. Next up we have the swords, and these are of course used in combat. Well, if you can call whacking most motionless pieces of cardboard, combat that is. As we've already gone over, this is a game about kids playing pretend, and of course that means the enemies we fight also aren't real. Every enemy is canonically a hand-drawn monster made by one of the kids on the island that the hero has to slay. And in doing so, we receive this game's currency, confetti, or paper scraps that are used to craft new equipment and purchase items like extra stamina bracelets. Cardboard enemies also serve as another form of this game's collectibles that you can work towards getting, or in this case, destroying all of. There's actually a ton of these, so it will take a decent amount of backtracking and paying attention if you want to destroy them all. Now, obviously, some people may be disappointed that there isn't any real combat in an adventure game like this, but personally, I don't really mind. The game goes all in on the idea of childish make-believe, and I respect that. Also, it's just not really the type of game that needs super in-depth combat. The quirky story and interesting characters are clearly the stars of the show here, and the enemies are only here to complete the whole adventure game aesthetic. Getting back on track here, the third type of equipment is the shield, and as you've probably seen, this is mainly used to slide on to make movement faster and more fun. There's even a few downhill races like the ones in Breath of the Wild on the mountain, which even further drives home the connection between the two games. Last but not least, we have the items of which you can have 2 equipped at a time. There's a bunch of different kinds of items you can get, but just to name some basic ones, there's a rock you can throw to either break enemies or just because you feel like throwing some rocks, and there's the balloons I talked about earlier that let you float upwards for a time at the cost of stamina. They're all pretty fun to mess around with, but aren't super necessary for basic gameplay. If I had to throw out one criticism here, it would be that I would have liked a couple more quests that relied on various items to complete, like a shooting gallery for thrown items, for example. If you were going for a Zelda theme here, a shooting gallery would definitely fit perfectly. But obviously this isn't a huge problem with the game, it's just something I would have enjoyed seeing. Overall though, the gameplay of Lil Gator Game was just as fun and unique as you'd expect from a game about an alligator dressed up as Link. Now that we've talked about the story and gameplay of Lil Gator Game, it's time to move on to the visuals and audio. And first up, as usual, are the visuals. Now, if I had to describe the art style of Lil Gator Game, I'd say it's like if you took Wind Waker, crossed it with Animal Crossing New Horizons, and then made it an indie game. It's a very visually appealing style. It hits that sweet spot between low poly and high poly graphics that gives you that clean, nostalgic look while also making it so that you can actually make out what everything is supposed to be. The shadowing is also really pronounced in Lil Gator Game, which I think helps to give it its own flavor. This is especially noticeable on large pieces of terrain like boulders, mountains, and trees. The sharpness of these shadows and how frequent they are also make the lights seem brighter and richer by comparison. It's a very nice little effect. The decision to have the game take place in autumn was another perfect choice in my opinion. The colorful trees scattered around the island make everything so much more vibrant and fun to look at. Then you add the wind blowing through the trees, sweeping the leaves along the ground and rustling the grass, and the atmosphere just comes to life. And don't even get me started on the character designs. I've been a sucker for anthropomorphic animals in my video games since I first played Banjo-Kazooie almost 25 years ago. Now obviously this game's animals aren't really in the Banjo-Kazooie style. If anything, I'd say they're closer to Animal Crossing, which I also love. In particular, I really like the design of the main hero. His jagged little mouth is great, the pants only look works just as well for him as it did for Banjo, and a big head with a small body was definitely the way to go. I also respect the decision to make the main character an animal that you wouldn't traditionally think of as a main character. Usually you see common animals like cats, dogs, bears, so on and so forth, but a gator, now that's something different and I think it really works. Moving over to the audio side of things now, I'd like to start by talking about something that may have been born out of some kind of developmental limitation, but that I still very much enjoyed, and that is the gibberish-style speech of the characters. If you don't understand what I mean by that, once again, picture Banjo-Kazooie or Animal Crossing. Now, for a game like this that relies so heavily on story and character interaction, you might think that a fully voiced cast would be the way to go, but I disagree. There's definitely some level of personal bias in that statement because I hold gibberish-style voices in very high regard, as you may have noticed, but that's not the main reason why I like them here. In my opinion, the quirky and unique nature of gibberish-style character voices fits in perfectly with the overall style of Lil Gator Game. I'd even go as far as to say it would be weird to hear actual real voices coming out of the mouths of these characters. If this was in fact a deliberate decision by the developers and not a product of limitation, I think it was an amazing one, especially where my personal personal enjoyment of the game is concerned. But enough about the voices, let's talk about my favorite part of any game's audio, the music. Up until this point, I've described a lot of this game as being a cross between Animal Crossing and Banjo-Kazooie, but when it comes to the music, it's a completely different story. Personally, I describe the music of Lil Gator Game as a cross between Animal Crossing and Zelda. See, what I tell you, completely different. All jokes aside though, there is a good deal of Lil Gator Game's own individual flair in the music. The style is just reminiscent of Animal Crossing or Zelda on some of the tracks. The general theme of the soundtrack here is one of relaxation and laid-back fun, which couldn't be more perfect for a game like this. I've always been a firm believer that music in a video game has the power to amplify a player's enjoyment of anything they're doing by a large margin if done correctly, and the music in Lil Gator Game definitely served to confirm this once again in my mind. This is of course true of the overall relaxed and fun feeling of the soundtrack that lines up with the feeling of the game as a whole, but it is also true of the music that can be found in each individual area of the world of Lil Gator Game. The music you hear while playing the game will dynamically shift as you move throughout the island to more accurately represent what you'll be doing and feeling in a particular area of the game, and I love this. Rather than just making a singular overall theme with a few extra tracks here and there for special moments, making a multitude of songs in different tones to better enhance the ambiance of each individual area is by far the better way to do things in my opinion. And nothing illustrates this better than the complete soundtrack that can be found on MegaWobble's official YouTube channel. Each song is set to an active background of an area on the island where it can be heard, or at least one that brings up a similar emotional response. If you're even a little bit interested in Lil Gator Game, definitely check out their channel. I promise you won't be disappointed. It's also a great way to relive the fun you had playing the game if you're someone like me who's already done everything there is to do in Lil Gator Game. What I'm trying to say is go listen to the soundtrack and subscribe to their channel because the music is really good, just like the game. I'll leave a link in the description for those interested. Lil Gator Game has quickly become one of my absolute favorite games, not only in recent memory but of all time. It was a wholesome adventure from start to finish that was extremely good at just making the player happy. That's not something I'd say about a lot of games out there, let alone other forms of media, and I think it's really something to be proud of as a developer. It's absolutely amazing to me that MegaWobble as a studio is made up of only 3 people, with only a few extra helping out on things like the music for Lil Gator Game. To be able to create something this complete, this entertaining, and this unique with so few people while others struggle to do half this with many times the workforce is a true accomplishment. If you didn't get it from how I've been gushing about this game for the last 20 minutes or so, I 100% recommend you give this game a try. It's only $20 on Steam and the Switch eShop, so it's definitely worth your time and money. But if you don't trust me, maybe trust the 99% positive reviews on Steam with over 1,000 total reviews. Lil Gator Game has clearly done something that has resonated with a lot of people, myself included, so if you're even a little interested, maybe check it out. Who knows, you might just have a ton of fun with this Lil Gator Game. But anyway, thanks as always for watching everyone. I hope you enjoyed the review and my return from a longish break from making content. If you did happen to enjoy today's video, consider giving it a like. It's always greatly appreciated and helps me out a ton. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, consider subscribing as well. Thanks again for watching everybody, and I'll see you in the next one. Ack out. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to MegaWobble too. Just between you and me, I may have ripped their soundtrack to make this video, so go and listen to the originals after this, so I don't feel as bad about doing that. Alright guys, have a good one.